Okay, let's get started. So, welcome to the Cyber Ireland South Chapter event and a cyber attack through the eyes of an attacker and defender in partnership with IT at Cork TechFest. The presentation today is going to be given by James Tierney of eCentre and Colin McSweeney of Dell. The presentation itself will last about 40 minutes. So if you have any questions at all, just pop them in the Q&A box and we'll have a bit of time for it at the end. Enjoy the talk today.
Thanks, Fiona. So, as Fiona said, my name is Colin McSweeney. I'm working in cybersecurity and Dell Technologies. I'm also partnered here with James. You want to introduce yourself, James?
Hello, everybody. I'm James Tierney. I'm the Security Operations Centre Manager at eCentre. We're based in Ballincollig, where Security Operations Centre is, and our headquarters are based in Waterloo in Canada also as well.
Very good. So thanks for having us. Really happy to be here talking about the anatomy of a cyber attack. I guess the world of cyber has never been busier for us. The cyber war is ongoing all around the world. We've seen a couple of weeks ago, an anonymous hacking group have declared war at Russia. Attacks have increased 600% since COVID started. On the next screen here, you're going to see incidents flashing up behind us. So this is the landing page of Checkpoint Firewall's website. So this was actually just recorded over 1 minute. So you can see the attacks are just constant, going on all the time. So I guess who are the hackers then? If we go on to the next slide. So often it can be nation states. So this can be fueled by geopolitical competition, a desire to gain advantage over other nations, or maybe to steal intellectual property for financial gain, or even just supporting traditional espionage. So we also have organized criminal gangs. These can be sophisticated gangs that are doing this as a business for financial gain as well. Or else, lastly, you have hacktivists. So hacktivists are generally doing this for a moral purpose, maybe to promote a political agenda or even promote social change. So why are they doing it? Usually it's for financial gain, but as I mentioned, sometimes there's a political agenda behind it, or to promote social change. How are they doing it? Sometimes they might encrypt intellectual property or data and demand ransom if you wanted a decryption key, or else they might sell it on the data on the black market as well. So there's good money to be made in that as well. They might use this information to, that they've gathered to either buy or sell stocks on the market as well. So this is known as insider trading. Fraud then is another common trend. So the attacker might try and manipulate someone by pretending to be someone that they're not, and they might get information out of that person or even get them to transfer money to them. So yeah, for today's talk, I'm going to be playing the role of an attacker. I'll be using the cyber kill chain as a blueprint for my attack. And James, if you want to say what you'll be doing.
Yep, so I'm going to look at the defending against cyber attack, which will go into kind of general terms of defense, really. So one of the main core concepts of cyber defense is a defense in depth, and that would include physical, technical, and administrative control. So that includes your physical, that's your physical perimeter, your building, all those kind of things. Your technical, what software you're using and what way it's being monitored, and then your administrative controls, what your procedures and policies are within that company. And they fall down into then this kind of layered approach that I'll go through today.
Great. So as you can see here on the screen, the first phase on an attack is the reconnaissance phase. So here I'm trying to gather as much information about my target as possible. So this can be either passive or active. So passive reconnaissance is where I'm doing stuff that's less likely to get caught. So I might be researching employees, getting employee names. From here, I might be trying to get their emails. Even just looking up someone on LinkedIn might be a way of doing this. Recently, there was a Chinese company hacked because they knew that the employees used to go to the restaurant across the road for their lunch every day. So what they did is they actually hacked into the restaurant and they put malware into the lunch menu. And then say the employees of the company were downloading the lunch menu onto their say corporate PCs or whatever, and the malware was getting it onto the network that way. So the other way is active reconnaissance. So this is a bit noisier, more likely to get caught. So this can be scanning using different tools such as Nmap. So Nmap is a free open source tool that allows you to see what devices are on a network. So it might also show you, say, different public facing IPs that are on the network. From here, you might be able to identify the DNS server, or else what OS versions might be running on the network as well, or even software versions that are running on the network. We'll get into a bit more detail about why this stuff is important later on. So how do I get this information? Basically just by scanning their network using free open source tools.
Yeah, so then on the defense side of things, so we're looking at perimeter security, and that includes your physical and digital. I suppose on the physical side of things, you want to make sure that your boundaries, everything like that, your all employees, it's only employees can get into your building. But we're more looking at the digital footprint here, and your firewalls, making sure you have a DMZ, demilitarized zone, whereas you're limiting the amount of external facing systems to the internet, and that reduces an attacker's ability to scan your network. And then you want to make sure all your ports are locked down also as well. So you don't want to put any IoTs, Internet of Things, anything like that, external facing with the ports open or default admin passwords and stuff like that. So there is a bit of due diligence needed on the company side of things here, and that's definitely vulnerability scanning and patching. So it should be constant, or else definitely a couple times a year that companies should be scanning their internal and external network and trying to identify any vulnerabilities that system might have. These vulnerability scans will then give you details about, okay, your router is not up to date and it should have this patch on it because this vulnerability is now in the wild and attackers are using it. Also, penetration testing is another due diligence that should be done definitely twice a year, and that's basically getting an external, preferably an external company to scan your network, try and hack in, and there's different ways of doing that. You could give them access into your internal also as well, and that then they produce a report for you, and you'll be able to action that report and see where they were successful and how to mitigate against that vulnerability.
Thanks, James. So the next step will be weaponization then. So this is where I'm trying to outline a methodology of intrusion and what tools I'm going to use to actually get into the network. So I've done my reconnaissance phase, and now I can use that information that I've gathered to try and decide how I'll attack this target. So I know the employee names, for example. I found their email on LinkedIn. So my next step might be to create a phishing email. This might be just something as simple as, oh yeah, free beer in the canteen at lunch. Click this link to register. And this link might have malware in it, and it installs on your PC once you click it. Surprisingly, phishing attacks actually account for 80 to 90% of cyber attacks. So even if I wanted to go more simple than that, again, if I have their email, I can start guessing weak passwords. If you have a bit of time later on, I'd recommend looking up the website 10,000 Worst Passwords. It's pretty hilarious, to be honest, and it's not really like that hard to guess what the passwords might be. Also, if I figured out like what the DNS server, the IP of the DNS server is, I might start sending requests to that and doing a DDoS attack, which would bring down their websites. Or else, if I actually manage to hack into the DNS server, I might be able to send emails with their domain. So instead of @gmail.com, their emails might be sent with @del.com, making it a bit more believable, I guess. So I also mentioned figuring out what OS versions or what software versions are running in the network. So if you look up, say you can look up different softwares on Google, and it'll basically list the softwares that are there and the vulnerabilities that are on them. So this is done because as defenders, we want to know like what vulnerabilities are out there so we can protect against them. But it's also good for attackers because once they know what software version you're running, they just have to look up the vulnerabilities and then exploit that vulnerability thereafter. And lastly, I guess the other way I could get in would be maybe with weak firewall rules, or if there's open ports, I could get in that way as well.
Yeah, very good. So then from the defender point of view, so we look at network security. So some of the controls that we put in place already, so making sure things are locked down. You might want to segregate your DNS servers, network segmentation also as well with virtual LANs, VLANs. So you want to lock that down also as well, depending on if some users need access to particular different subnets within your network. Anything that you can do helps, and that will mitigate against malware propagation across your network. I suppose a big thing in network security is monitoring. So an IDS or an IPS is definitely recommended. It's something that one of our core products in eCentire, and with that you'll be able to see what's going on your network, north-south traffic, to be able to see what's going in and what's going out, and what doesn't look right should trigger a rule, and then a trained professional should look at that rule and investigate what's happening there. For instance, Colin mentioned phishing. So if most phishing is done over unencrypted traffic, so it's not encrypted. So if you have you're monitoring through an IDS and IPS, you'll be able to see that traffic through. Maybe a lot of people on the call might know of Wireshark or similar tool like that. You'd be able to see that a user clicked on something, they went to an unencrypted website, they entered in their username and password, they entered in their credit card credentials or whatever the attacker is looking for. And then it's up for that security analyst to lock down that person's account, isolate their host, and get that user to change their passwords immediately. So that's the power of IPS and IDS, and it's definitely recommended in these scenarios.
Yes, thanks, James. So next phase, delivery then. So this is where I'm transitioning the weapon I've created already, so whatever the phishing email or whatever malware I've done, to the target. So how do I get this weapon to the target? So like I've mentioned before, email is the most common way to deliver this payload. You can also use USB sticks. It's actually happened a few times in the Pentagon apparently. So what would happen here is a malicious actor might come in with a USB stick with some malware on it, and they just might leave it on a desk or something like this. And naturally enough, someone picks up this USB stick and they say, oh, I wonder who owns this, they must have lost it. And they plug it into their PC to see if there's any files in it that might indicate who actually owns it. So once that's injected into the PC, then the malware gets uploaded onto it. So why am I doing this at this phase? So now I'm trying to establish a foothold in the network. So I might be trying to install a persistent backdoor. This could be anything that allows me into the network whenever I need access. FinSpy is actually an example of a tool that does this for you. So it allows the attacker to execute files remotely on the system.
Yeah, great. And so from the defense point of view, the human layer is very important. So humans are the weakest link when it comes to cyber security and security of a company's posture. And that might be down to malicious insiders, or it could be just negligent users, or they just click on something that they shouldn't click on, really. I think everybody's done it at some stage or another. But it's very important to have that threat mitigated. And we do that by security awareness training. It's a huge thing. So definitely regular security awareness training that covers things like, physical stuff such as tailgating. That's when somebody holds the door open for somebody to let them through. We're all very polite people, but that shouldn't happen, and everybody in a company should know that the person in front of them is expected to close that door, and they're supposed to open it up themselves. Also, like Colin mentioned, any devices or anything that's lying around, make sure that and hand them into your cybersecurity department. Email hygiene as well, when to click on the links, when to report any spam that comes in. And how you test that then is you should have phishing simulation campaigns. So regularly send phishing emails to your employees to see who clicks on them, see who doesn't, see who reports it. And the people who have failed that test should really just go in for more security awareness training, and it's a constant thing that needs to happen.
Great. So now I've got my foothold in the network. I've got onto the network, and now I want to exploit whatever code it is that'll get me some money, I guess. So that might be encrypting their data or whatever. So often attackers actually will do nothing when they get on a network initially. So they want to go undetected for as long as possible. So they might just snoop around for a long time and gather as much information as they can. SolarWinds actually was an example of a hack where this happened. Not everyone on the call might know what SolarWinds is, but basically it's a network monitoring tool. So it gives you a traffic light system of whether your servers are up or down. But it does it for the whole network. So to do this, it actually needs privileged access into the whole network. So as you can imagine, if a hacker got into this, it's really bad because they have full visibility of your entire network. And what actually happened here was, say, SolarWinds were building their software and the hackers managed to get into their GitLab repository and get the malicious code into the build. It didn't get spotted and it actually got pushed out to, I think it got pushed out to nearly all their customers, but SolarWinds is used by 80% of Fortune 500 companies. So a lot of companies actually got, say, infected here, but they didn't actually exploit the code on, I think they might have only exploited on maybe 10-20% of these customers. So, which is pretty lucky, but it wasn't until I think 2019 that this was discovered. And when they actually did a bit of analysis on it, they realized that this code had been in these networks for almost 5 years. So we can see here that like the attackers were just snooping around the place for 5 years and going undetected. Yeah, so that's basically that one.
Okay, yeah, so then we move on to endpoint security and endpoint security monitoring and switchability of isolation. So endpoint security is traditionally, people will think of antivirus and things like that, but it's gone a bit deeper than that. So there is definitely a lot of next generation kind of endpoint security products out there that are really good. And for instance, for Column's example there of a supply chain attack with SolarWinds, endpoint security antivirus is mainly signature based. So that means that they know that this particular executable is bad and they will, or they're not sure about it and they'll hold it and they'll scan it. Whereas in that case, if you think about the SolarWinds, that wouldn't have happened because it's a genuine SolarWinds installation file or update that was on those networks. So what the extra endpoint security products are is to basically go that little bit deeper and see what an attacker might do when they're in there. They'll see what processes are running, what registry edits, what sort of persistence that Colin's talking about there to get a foothold in the network. If they're trying to communicate out to the external and, or in a phishing example, let's say, so somebody opens up Outlook, they open up a Word document, and then from that Word document maybe a command prompt or a PowerShell script executes. That's not normal behavior, and that's something that one of these like very specific endpoint products pick up. Also, a lot of the malware out there have gotten very good at evading your traditional antivirus. So it's important to have these endpoint security products, but it's obviously more important to actually have trained personnel to be able to monitor these and understand them and investigate and then isolate it immediately when you see any nefarious activities happening.
Great. So the next phase is installation. So once they've gained access, now they're trying to install more malware again. They're trying to escalate their privileges and see what other data they can access. They're also probably doing some internal reconnaissance. So basically just exploring the internal environment and trying to understand their internal infrastructure. So maybe figure out what kind of storage information they can get their hands on, or even say look at what roles are out there and what responsibilities people have, which could allow them into other different systems and stuff. They're also probably trying to access the VPN, which will give them more access again. So.
Yeah, so then on the application, we move on to application and log monitoring. So all of this, like I mentioned, is a layered approach. So the endpoint security should pick this up, sort of stuff up. So should the network security also as well. But in the application security, obviously access controls is a huge thing. You should only be giving the person that needs access least privilege. But then it's very important. All of these systems that go on a network generate logs, and all those logs should be put together and they should be investigated for any triggers or anything like that. There's a lot of different SIM technologies that do this. But so it's really important to be able to find out if something as bad is happening or if there's an attacker in your network. So if you can imagine imagine an impossible travel rule. Colm, like you mentioned there, is based in Limerick. So he's logged onto a system, and then all of a sudden we see a log event come in, and Colm is actually after logging in from India or China or somewhere else, and that's called impossible travel. So that shouldn't be happening. So we need to understand, is somebody after getting access to his account? In some cases, there might be, reason for this. He might have stayed logged in into a system and went on holidays. He's from India and he logged in, but it's definitely worth checking. And we've definitely caught a lot of actors this way. Some other ways for log helps also as well is internal brute forces. So credential gatherings and all those kind of different reconnaissance within the network for the attacker. So we see brute forces. So logs get created as Colm is constantly trying to log into the system with different passwords. That should be a red flag, and that's something that your SIM technology will trigger. Unauthorized access attempts. Colm is trying to access the system where he has no business trying to access. That should trigger an event. Especially Active Directory logs. Is Colm trying to, or somebody after creating a new domain admin account, that should trigger something very high priority, and that should be investigated. Maybe a system admin genuinely is creating a new domain admin account, but that should definitely be investigated, and that's part of that escalated privilege part that the attacker will take.
Great. So as I mentioned already, I've got access to the VPN. I can now remotely control James's systems, hopefully going undetected. James might say otherwise. So now my next step is to complete the mission. So this could be anything from stealing an intellectual property, seeing their financial data, seeing what mergers and acquisitions might be coming down the pipeline, or even just trying to gather personally identifiable information as well. My mission might be to encrypt data, so try to get some ransomware out of James, or else even to disrupt their services, so bring down their websites or destroy their data maybe.
Yeah, so if we look at then the data security part of the defense, so obviously again, access security controls, policies and procedures to be able to make sure that you keep a good security posture. So a big thing labeled is authorization creep. And what that means is that somebody genuinely working in your company is after maybe changing department or getting promoted or whatever like that, and they keep the same privileges that they had, and they're just given more privileges. If you can imagine somebody that was working in the HR department which would have access to a lot of sensitive information, and then they decide for a career change to move to the marketing department, all their HR access should be taken away from them and they should be given the marketing. But that doesn't always happen, and that's kind of a failure in the policies and procedures that internal companies need to have. Colm mentioned backup or ransomware. So, we can backups network segmentation again with VLANs to separate your backups from your network. So what will happen is for a ransomware is traditionally ransomware will get onto your network, try and encrypt all your data, and it'll also try and encrypt your backups. But if you have your backups segregated, then that's your recovery point there. So you can be able to say, okay, we've lost a few hours of data here. We can recover and we get all this data back. Ransomware has kind of changed as well now in the fact that the companies that are the malicious attackers that do ransomware, they actually exfiltrate your data also as well as encrypting. And what that means is they're taking your data out of your company, and then what will happen is, okay, you can restore from your backups, but your data is gone out in the wild, and they can ransom it, saying that they're going to actually give it to your competitors or make it public knowledge, and obviously that's not good. So what you're looking at there for the exfiltration part, you need to be looking at maybe data loss prevention and tactics about how to do this. There is software out there that will manage this for you if you set it up right. So data loss prevention, you could label your data, so your security, your critical, your public data, and you can mark it so that if somebody tries to take that data outside of the company, let's say from an email, a sensitive email is labeled, then they shouldn't be allowed to do that. An alert should trigger for your security department to say that Colm is now trying to take data from his emails out, send it out to a personal email address. There's obviously data trends, different software that can do that also as well, and look at is there a spike in data leaving your company? Is there any IP addresses, any data going outside of the network through an FTP server? an unknown FTP server, maybe going to an IP address in a country that shouldn't be. That's definitely a big flag as well that should be looked at. So there's multiple parts there in the data security that you can handle. Yeah, so I think that's more or less everything that we're going to go through. I suppose like everything on the defense side that I've kind of talked about there is definitely a lot of really good products out there, but it's very important to get the right people managing those products, because if they're all set up correctly and alerts are going out, but they're not being checked and they're not being actioned in an appropriate time, so the attacker needs to be locked down. And so every event that comes in from any of your security products needs to be investigated by a security professional and isolated and mitigated as soon as possible. And time is of the essence of these kind of things.
Great. I hope everyone has learned something here today anyway, and hopefully no one's going to try and attack anyone or hack into anything now after this. Hopefully you're learning on the defensive side, but yeah, we're open to questions as well.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions and they'd like to pop them into the Q&A, James and Colin are happy to answer questions. Thank you very much, guys. That was very interesting and very informative. Well done on that.
No worries.
There's a question now. So with this approach, would you suggest single pane or of glass, or not all your eggs in one basket?
I can start that one. So it depends on the question. I suppose for what we do in eCentire, we look at a single pane. But what that is ingesting multiple signals from multiple different products. So an analyst in eCentire, which will be in a 24/7 SOC, is basically monitoring anything from log, endpoint, cloud, SIM technologies, and network. And to be able to bring them in together and ease of use for whoever is managing it is imperative, to be able to give a holistic view of an investigation. If they have to remote into a lot of different systems, then that's time consuming and it mightn't be as linked up as possible. So again, time is of the essence when you're defending against a cyber attack. So the more information that you can ingest into a readable format for whoever is investigating is the best approach.
Thanks, James. And there's another one in there now. I've heard about people automating their L1 security operations. What exactly does this mean and how do they do it?
I can take that as well. So automation is very good. You want to reduce the amount of false positives, and you want to reduce the amount of unnecessary data that's coming to anybody who's investigating. So automation should come out in ways such as an FTP server connection, an SSH connection into something, all that kind of stuff. That should all be notifications going to those people, those departments, auto notifications going to the people who need them, where then the more detailed investigation should be going to human, and that human should be trained and they should be investigating. Like I mentioned before, they should be opening up an endpoint product. They should be looking at that endpoint product and saying, okay, I see emails after opening up. I see it's something's after triggering there. It's emotet. It's a banking Trojan. Now it's trying to replicate itself. We need to lock that down. And they're the real important ones. But yeah, automation is key to make your life easier.
Great, thanks guys. It's great questions coming in here. Either of you, are employees still our biggest risk in terms of hackers getting in?
Absolutely, I think, yeah. As we mentioned already, say 80 to 90% of hacks and compromises actually come from phishing emails. So that's generally an insider clicking on a link, probably not with malicious intent, but they're just getting fooled by whatever phishing emails are coming in. So yeah, there's definitely good merit in having a good kind of employee training program there to raise awareness around this. So yeah.
Perfect. Should a SOC operate on a separate network for incident response in the event of a compromise?
It's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. Any network segregation is where it can be done is always recommended. So you do want to have definitely separated for your SOC. It depends on what way your policies and procedures are in your SOC. You don't want your security analysts downloading something onto, I suppose, the company network and checking out malware that propagates itself or creates more investigations. So definitely using sandbox environments is very important for the SOC. Yeah.
And how would you prevent data exfiltration via USB?
Guess there is logging, isn't there, James? Like logging is probably, say, Windows logs are generated for every time a USB is injected or ejected, I guess. Generally, I don't usually see a need for someone to be using a USB too often, other than if they're working on servers or whatever and transferring, say, images and stuff. So like you could have them maybe whitelisted that the people you know are doing it for good use. But like, I guess other than that, people don't really need USBs or to be injecting them into their corporate systems anymore. So creating alerts for when people do that, I'd say would be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of companies would do have got rid of they through group policy they would have locked down and people can't put in USBs into their laptops or anything like that. And like Con said, user awareness training. Like, I mean, there's so many sharing options these days within your network, within, you know, other facilities such as SharePoint, all these kind of ways that people can share these data. So it's less necessary for people to be using USB pens. Yeah.
Great, thanks, guys. There's some great questions still coming in, so I just might shoot you a couple more, if that's okay. So how do you make sure that senior management within an organization continue to prioritize security outside of times of raised awareness after a public cyber attack? I think that's a great question.
Could you just repeat that one?
Yeah. So how do you make sure that senior management continue to prioritize security outside of times of a raised awareness after a public cyber attack? So I suppose how do you make sure that senior management always prioritize this?
Yeah, I'd say risk assessments are definitely the way to go, and all senior management should be doing their due diligence and doing risk assessments on their networks. So you look at the qualitative and quantitative kind of risks that are involved, and if you look at the any risk involved in a data breach. Okay, so you have your products and all the products that I listed before or talked about there, the types of products, they all cost money, and having a security provider manage that, it's always recommended to have an external company to manage your data for you, manage your security for you, because it's very difficult. We're in the cyber world. There's over 1 million open vacancies, and it's very hard to fill these. It's a very technical role, and it's very competitive also as well. So it takes a long time for security analysts to get trained up, and then, you know, they do get poached, and because they're so sought after. But back to the question, and all that costs money. But if you look at what you are going to pay through, if you had a data breach and that you have to notify through GDPR or HIPAA or anything like that, that the reputational damage that your company will suffer will far outweigh the costs of your cyber budget, and regular penetration tests and regular scanning and risk assessments is probably the way to go. Facts to show that this is it, and then also bring in the fact that you look at different breaches around the world and how companies have suffered from those.
Great. And this one now is, if I can get your opinion on this, have there been any new methods of attack that you may think will rise in popularity? Is there anything coming down the tracks that you've seen?
I guess with every new software that's released or every new OS, there's going to be new vulnerabilities on them, and it's a matter of keeping up with patching and stuff like that, as you'd hope that the vendor that you're using is keeping up with the vulnerabilities that they're releasing. But yeah, it's constantly there's constantly new threats coming in and stuff. So yeah, yeah, James, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, when I was a security officer for a different company before I came to East Centre, and we didn't have an IPS or IDS, and I was taken back by the amount of attacks that happen on a constant basis, whether that be through reconnaissance or just knocking on the door, saying, are you susceptible to this or this vulnerability? No, and I'll move on. It's all automated. And what happens is then when it does find the door open, then it just comes back to the attacker and go, I'm not finding an IP address over here that's vulnerable, and then they hone in on you. Like there's different some malicious malware comes back, like, and it's because it's so good for the attackers. I was reading lately Emotet, which is a banking Trojan, and what that does, it gets distributed by spam email, and then once it gets onto your system, you can do a lot of things. It does the command and control, which Colin had mentioned, and then the attacker can load in whatever they want it to do, but that then self-propagates itself, and that was blocked. That was by Conti was the name of the group, and they were shut down last year. But I see that it's come back, and developers are constantly bringing back that type of Trojan that will steal information. Again, a lot of the attacks are this is where the tools come in, the endpoint security, to be able to see what the attackers. If somebody wants to get into your network, they're probably going to do it, depending on how sophisticated they are. We call them APTs, so Advanced Threat Protection, but that's a sophisticated attacker targeting you, like Colin did there with his reconnaissance and finding out who the employees, all that kind of stuff. They will probably find a way in. Depending on their skill level, but it's about having that layered security approach that we've kind of went through, that the endpoint, the log, the network, the policies and procedures, to be able to catch them and lock it down, and then do your investigation, your instant handler investigation, to find out how did they get in it and patch that up then as well.
Okay, great, guys. And I'm just going to shoot you one more. This is the final question. What is the best practice in terms of vulnerability management, from frequency of scanning and SLA to resolve the vulnerability?
I guess it would depend on your risk appetite, James, wouldn't it? Pretty much. If you're looking after, I guess, government information or federal information or whatever, you're going to have a higher risk or lower risk appetite. So you're going to need to do more vulnerability scanning, and you're going to need a lower SLA to resolve those vulnerabilities. But yeah, it depends on what data you're looking after, I'd say would be the answer there. James, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, it depends again on your security posture, but I mean, like Patch Tuesday is called Patch Tuesday for a reason, and it should be done regularly. Back in the days when I was a system administrator, it probably wasn't done as much as it should have been done in any company. I worked for smaller companies and multinationals also as well. Multinationals were better at it, but it is definitely, it is something that needs to be done. There's downsides to it as well. I mean, if you keep on patching everything, stuff is going to break, so you need to have your environment that you're going to be able to test it in. Your UAT environment is the proper process to do it, and make sure everything's still working, and you push it into your production. So yeah, definitely from the vulnerability scanning, it should be, I'd always recommend monthly, but definitely a couple of times a year anyway at the minimum, and be able to patch up those products, especially if you've got new products in. If any changes are happening on your network, it's definitely a good time to do it.
Great. Thanks so much for your time today, guys. That was absolutely brilliant and very informative. I'm sure everybody learned something new today. So thank you very much for attending our session for TechFest.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Fiona. See you.
No problem, Colin. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.